I want to talk about libertarianism and the alt right, or the alternative right, and as a subtitle I have chosen "In Search of a Libertarian Strategy for Social Change." We all know the fate of the term liberal and liberalism. It has been affixed to so many different people and different positions that it has lost all its meaning and become an empty, nondescript label. And the same fate, I fear, has now also increasingly threatens the term libertarian and libertarianism that was invented to regain some of the conceptual precision that was lost with the demise of the terms liberal and liberalism. However, the history of modern libertarianism is still quite young. It began actually in Murray Rothbard's living room and found its first quasi-canonical expression in his book For a New Liberty, a Libertarian Manifesto. This was published in 1973. And the libertarian movement included initially no more than about 10 people fitting in Murray Rothbard's living room. And because of the young age of libertarianism, I'm hopeful and not yet willing to give up the term as it has been defined and explained by Rothbard with unrivaled clarity and precision, notwithstanding the meanwhile countless attempts of so-called libertarians to muddy the water and misappropriate a good name of libertarianism for something entirely different. The theoretical, irrefutable core of the libertarian doctrine is simple and straightforward, and I have explained it already repeatedly at this place. If there were no scarcity in the world, human conflicts, or more precisely, physical clashes, would be impossible. Interpersonal conflicts are always conflicts concerning scarce things. I want to do A with a given thing, and you want to do B with the very same thing. And because of such conflicts, and because we are able to communicate and argue with each other, we seek out norms of behavior with the purpose of avoiding these conflicts. The purpose of norms is conflict avoidance. If we did not want to avoid conflicts, the search for norms of conduct would be senseless. We would simply fight and struggle. Now, absent a perfect harmony of all interests, conflicts regarding scarce resources can only be avoided if all scarce resources are assigned as private, exclusive property to some specified individual or group of individuals. Only then can I act independently with my own things from you with your own things, without you and me physically clashing. But who owns what scarce resource as his private property and who does not? Now, first, each person owns his physical body that only he and no one else controls directly. And second, as for scarce resources that can be controlled only indirectly, that must be appropriated with our own nature-given, that is unappropriated body, exclusive control or property is acquired by and assigned to that person who appropriated the resource in question first, or who acquired it through voluntary and conflict-free exchange from its previous owner. Because only the first appropriator of a resource and all later owners connected to him through a chain of voluntary exchanges can possibly acquire and gain control over it without conflict, that is, peacefully. Otherwise, if exclusive control is assigned instead to latecomers, conflict is not avoided, but contrary to the very purpose of norms, made unavoidable and permanent. Now, before this audience, I do not need to go into greater detail except to add this. If you want to live in peace with other people and avoid all physical clashes, and if such clashes do occur, seek to resolve them peacefully, then you must be an anarchist or a proponent of a private law society, or more precisely, you must be a private property anarchist, an anarcho-capitalist, or, as I said, a proponent of a private law society. And by implication then, and again without much further ado, someone or anyone is not a libertarian or merely a fake libertarian who affirms and advocates one or more of the following things, for instance: the necessity of a state, any state, of public or state property, and of taxes in order to live in peace, or who affirms the existence and justifiability of any so-called human rights or civil rights other than private property rights, such as women rights, gay rights, minority rights, the right not to be discriminated against, the right to free and unrestricted immigration, which is the right to free trespassing, the right to a guaranteed minimum income or to free health care, or the right to be free of unpleasant speech and thought. The proponents of any of this may call themselves whatever they want, and as libertarians, we may well cooperate with them insofar as such cooperation offers the promise of bringing us closer to our ultimate goal, but they are not libertarians, or only fake libertarians. Now, a funny thing happened on the way to the forum. While Rothbard and I, following in his footsteps, never went astray from these theoretically derived core beliefs, not just non-libertarians, but in particular also fake libertarians, that is, people claiming falsely to be libertarians, and even many possibly honest yet dim-witted libertarians have selected and vilified us as their favorite bête noire and incarnates of evil. Rothbard, the spiritus rector of modern libertarianism, has been branded, for instance, by this so-called anti-fascist crowd as a reactionary, a racist, a sexist, an authoritarian, an elitist, a xenophobe, a fascist, and, to top it all off, as a self-hating Jewish Nazi. And I have inherited all of these honorary titles, plus a few more, except for the Jewish stuff. So what funny thing has happened here? Now, trying to develop an answer to this question brings me to the topic of this speech, namely the relationship between libertarianism and the alternative right, or the alt-right, which has gained national and international notoriety after Hillary Clinton, during the last presidential election campaign, identified it as one of the inspirational sources behind the basket of deplorables rooting for Trump, and which, I must say and emphasize, which after Trump's election victory, the alternative right, quickly broke with Trump. At least most of the people broke with Trump when it turned out that he was just another presidential warmonger. Now, the alt-right movement is essentially the successor of the paleo-conservative movement that came to prominence in the early 1990s, with columnist and best-selling author Patrick Buchanan as its best-known representative. It went somewhat dormant by the late 1990s, and it has recently, in light of the steadily growing damage done to America and its reputation by the successive Bush 1, Clinton, Bush 2, and Obama administration, it has re-emerged more vigorous than before under the new label of alt-right. Many of the leading lights associated with the alt-right have appeared here at our meetings in the course of the years. Paul Gottfried, who first coined the term, Peter Brimelow, Richard Lynn, Jared Taylor, John Derbyshire, Steve Seiler, and Richard Spencer. As well, Sean Gabb's name is occasionally associated with, and my name is also regularly mentioned in connection with the alt-right. And my work has also been linked also with the closely related neo-reactionary movement inspired by Curtis Yarvin, who I also personally know, and who wrote under the pen name Mencius Moldbug, and his now defunct blog, Unqualified Reservations. In sum, these personal relations and associations have earned me several honorable mentions by America's most famous smear and defamation league, the Southern Poverty Law Center, which my good friend Tom DiLorenzo always refers to as a Soviet Poverty Lie Center. Now, how about the relationship between libertarianism and the alt-right, and my reasons for having invited leading representatives of the alt-right to meetings with libertarians? Libertarians are united by the irrefutable theoretical core beliefs mentioned at the outset. They are clear about the goal that they want to achieve. But the libertarian doctrine does not imply much, if anything, concerning these two following questions. First, how to maintain a libertarian order once you have achieved it, and more importantly, second, how to attain a libertarian order from a non-libertarian starting point, which requires, of course, on the one hand, that one must correctly describe this starting point, and secondly, one must correctly identify the obstacles posed in the way of one's libertarian ends by this very starting point. To answer these questions, in addition to theory, you also need some knowledge of human psychology and sociology, or at least a modicum of common sense. Yet many libertarians and fake libertarians are plain ignorant of human psychology and sociology, or even devoid of any common sense. They blindly accept, against all empirical evidence, an egalitarian, blank slate view of human nature, that is, that all people and all societies and all cultures are essentially equal and interchangeable. Now, while much of contemporary libertarianism then can be characterized as theory and theorists without psychology and sociology, much or even most of the alt-right can be described in contrast as psychology and sociology without any theory. The alt-righters are not united by a commonly held theory, and there exists nothing even faintly resembling a canonical text defining its meaning. Rather, the alt-right is essentially united in its description of the contemporary world, and in particular the US and the so-called Western world, and the identification and diagnosis of its social pathologies. In fact, it has been correctly noted that the alt-right is far more united by what it is against than what it is for. It is against, and indeed it hates with a passion, the elites in control of the state, the mainstream media and academia. And why? Because the state, the mainstream media and academia all promote social degeneracy and pathology. Thus, they promote, and the alt-right vigorously opposes, egalitarianism, affirmative action or non-discrimination laws, multiculturalism, and free mass immigration as a means to bring about this multiculturalism. As well, the alt-right loathes everything smacking of cultural Marxism or Gramsciism, named after Antonio Gramsci, the Italian communist. and they hate all political correctness, and strategically wise, I think, it shrugs off without any apology whatsoever all accusations of being racist, sexist, elitist, supremacist, homophobe, xenophobe, and so on and so on. And the alt-right also laughs off as hopelessly naive the programmatic motto of so-called libertarians such as the Students for Liberty, which I have also termed the Stupids for Liberty. And my young German friend André Lichtschlag has referred to them as the Liberalala libertarians. And their motto of peace, love, and liberty, which Lichtschlag appropriated, translated into German as Friede, Freude, Eierkuchen libertarians. Now, in stark contrast to this, alt-righters insist that life is also about strife, hate, struggle, and fight, not just between individuals, but also among various groups of people acting in concert. Millennial Vos, pen name, a guy whose actual name is Colin Robertson, has thus, I think, aptly summarized the alt-right, and I quote, "Equality is bullshit, hierarchy is essential, the races are different, the sexes are different, morality matters, and degeneracy is real. All cultures are not equal, and we are not obligated to think that they are. Man is a fallen creature, and there is more to life than hollow materialism. Finally, the white race matters, and civilization is precious. This is the alt-right." End of quote. Now, absent any unifying theory, however, there is far less agreement among the alt-right about the goal that it ultimately wants to achieve. Many of its leading lights have distinctly libertarian leanings, most notably those that have come here, which of course was the reason for having them invited in the first place, even if they were not 100%ers. And all alt-righters that have appeared here, for instance, have been familiar with Rothbard and his work. All the while, the most recent presidential candidate of the Libertarian Party in the United States had never even heard of Rothbard's name. And all of them, those that I had here, to the best of my knowledge, were outspoken supporters of Ron Paul during his primary campaign for the Republican Party's nomination as presidential candidate. All of them. All the while, many self-proclaimed libertarians attacked and tried to vilify Ron Paul for his supposedly, and you know already what is coming, racist views. However, several of the alt-right leaders and many of its rank-and-file followers have also endorsed views that are